So welcome to this video supplement on determining the steps in constructing a valid measurement technique. So in this short video, I'll be showing you two examples on how to do this. So as you've seen in your module, there are 4 steps to do this. So the first one is to identify the variable you want to measure. The second one is to come up with the operational definition of that variable and to determine the data collection format that you will use, and finally the data collection instrument or instruments that you will use. So first example, let's say that the variable that we want to measure is achievement of basic computer literacy by students. So if this is the one we want to measure, we must first define it. So what we mean by operational definition is that we define the variable we want to measure according to how we will use it in our research. So when we say operational definition, it's not necessarily a definition that you get out of a dictionary, but it's, well, if you can also do that if you want, but I would suggest that the best way to go about this is to define your variable in terms of how you will actually make use of this variable. So for example, there's a lot of ways to define the term basic computer literacy, but let's say that for the purposes of your research, you will want to define operationally basic computer literacy as the ability of the students to turn on the computer, surf the internet, and to do basic word processing. So having this operational definition, what is the format of collecting the data on basic computer literacy? So the format would be in, let's say, in structured observations, in terms of going, for example, to the CEC and having a set of observations, seeing how students use computers, and then perhaps you can also come up with a scoring system on how you will look at the students using specified criteria. So the format of data that you will collect here are in the nominal and ordinal formats. So you will see that in your other modules. So finally, we have your data collection instruments. So what instruments will you use in carrying out structured observations and also in scoring? So you can come up with or develop scoring sheets. You can also come up with checklists, for example, that an observer can use. For example, there's a checklist that you will tick off specific areas that you will observe students doing, for example, surfing the internet or using basic word processing tools. And you can also look for standardized tests on computer literacy that the other organizations or other educational institutions are already using. So let's go to another example. Okay, let's say that the variable we want to measure is the CEC user's place of residence. You would want to know, for example, in your CEC, where do most people in your municipality come from, and then how does this affect, for example, how does the location, for example, of the CEC affect the way they access services, especially for people who live farther away. So in defining the term place of residence, for your research, you can, for example, come up with an operational definition like the barangay where your CEC user has been living in for the last 5 years. So this is an example. So the format of collecting this data is, you come up or you get the name of the barangay where the user lives. So either you write down the name of the barangay itself, like let's say Barangay Santa Cruz, or what some do, for example, if a municipality has really a lot of barangays, let's say more than 20, Some of them will start just encoding or using a numbering system to represent every barangay. So for example, barangay Santa Cruz might correspond to the code 1, and then the next barangay like Barangay Poblacion will be encoded as number 2. So this can be a nominal type of data collection format. And the instruments that you can use to collect the data is, you can just develop a checklist of all barangays in your questionnaire. You just identify already all the names of the barangay, and then just check the barangay where your user is living. And you can also make use of logbooks. For example, you can add a column in your logbook wherein you can note down the name of the barangay where your customer comes from. And you can also use questionnaires and ask people, what barangay do you live in? So, based on their answers, you can just write this down on the questionnaires. So those are examples of how of the steps that you can do in coming up with valid operational measures for your variables, and also in using indicators.